Before diving into this review, I'd first like to mention that this video will be split up into two parts. The first part will be me reviewing Trails in the Sky first chapter as a game on its own merit, breaking down its best aspects as well as some of its flaws. Whereas the second half of this video will focus on first chapter as a remake from the point of view of someone who's already played the original, pointing out what the remake gets right and wrong. Now, with that brief disclaimer out of the way, let's take a look at Trails in the Sky first chapter. Personally, I felt like 2025 hasn't been all that great for JRPGs. Sure, we had the masterpiece that was Clair Obscura, and the last Defense Academy was pretty good, but a lot of the titles that have come out this year haven't really gripped me, especially when compared to what came out back in 2024. Even with Trails 3 Daybreak 2, which released earlier on in this year, I personally felt fairly mixed towards by the time I reached the credits. But with this remake of first chapter bringing things back to the series' roots whilst adding in some tweaks here and there, I feel like its timing couldn't be more better since we've needed something like this for a while now. Especially when you consider how the original game isn't available on modern consoles, with it being locked behind Steam and the PlayStation Portable. In Trails in the Sky, you play as Estelle Bright, and with her adopted brother Joshua, you set off to explore the lands of Liberl, meeting many faces and solving many stories along the way. The game manages to blend both serious and slice of life moments really well, making for a more unique blend of JRPG. How it manages to pull this off so effectively is with you playing out the occupational role of a bracer, which is basically someone who helps citizens out with all kinds of odd jobs, kind of like a mercenary, except it's government funded. So they're pretty much the smiling friends. Anyway, this simple premise allows the story to go in all kinds of directions. One moment the game could be focused on you enjoying school life, the next could be about unearthing a scandal over political infighting and propaganda being spread out to the masses. I have heard some complaints over the years directed at Trails in the Sky first chapter, saying how some of its story arcs can feel like filler. But to me, it's always been a journey over destination type of experience, so the more light-hearted parts sprinkled in here and there is something I've always been a fan of. First chapter is very engaging and immersive. The Trails series in general thrives on its profound amounts of world building. It's by far the most in-depth and interconnected series I've ever followed. The NPCs, for instance, unlike with most games, all have their own unique names and will constantly update their dialogue to react to what's going on in the story. They're way more than just glorified tutorials and actually have substantial writing to them. If you do any of the game's optional side quests, they'll remember it and bring it up later on when you bump into them along your journey. There's also its in-game newspaper that releases new issues each chapter, which chronicles what's going on around the nation of Liberl to further sell you on its living, breathing world. When replaying first chapter again with its remake, I can really appreciate how its party cast is more smaller than in the future titles. This allows for more focus to be placed on each individual party member that you meet, which further complements the game's slower pace with you gradually being introduced to each colourful character. I can also just appreciate how your party lineup spans different ages, classes and walks of life. It makes for some great visual diversity, which also allows each party member to stand out from one another. Party members also come and go naturally throughout each of the game's chapters, which adds an extra layer of realism to the world of Liberl. They're not just tied to you arbitrarily once their character arcs end and will frequently leave the party to do their own thing, allowing the game to focus more on Joshua and Estelle's dynamic, which is by far one of the best aspects of Trails in the Sky. It might not be for everyone, but if you can appreciate the nuanced and more character-focused writing styles, then you'll enjoy how the game goes about Estelle and Joshua's chemistry between one another. It's a slow game that takes its time going about it, but when replaying this entry for the remake, the addition of voice acting adds a lot to how Estelle deconstructs Joshua as a character and how she connects with him by helping him get through his insecurities. This is all brought to life even better with the remake, with the voice actors' solid performances. I personally found each character's vocal performance to be on point, and they sounded just like how I'd picture these characters in my head whilst reading the original game all those years ago. Another aspect I really noticed when playing Trails in the Sky again is how it goes about its own in-game politics. If this topic upsets you at all as an outsider, then let me just say the Trails series as a whole explores more political topics than even Metal Gear Solid, so yeah, that's definitely something worth bringing up here. Its meaningful messaging behind how individuals make up a country, not just the people in power, is a theme I can really appreciate, especially with how I'm getting older and being more subject to the world today than when I played the original title. What I'm trying to say here is that it's a good way to cope and it's an aspect that's pulled off really well and tastefully. I feel like most people will appreciate it, and like a lot of the themes depicted in this series, the way the game slowly introduces and builds up each plot point makes it feel organic, like a living, breathing world. Speaking of, playing this game on a second playthrough with the remake, I was surprised with just how many events are solidly foreshadowed here, with them becoming much more relevant later on in the series. I won't say specific examples here since they are spoilers, but I even went back and double checked the original game script to see if it lines up, and it did. It makes a lot of sense when looking at first chapter retrospectively, from the perspective of someone who has caught up with all the Western localized releases in the Trail series. Moving forward, one big change First Chapter's remake makes from the original is with its newly revamped battle system, taking many notes from the Daybreak entries. A good example of this in particular is with its hybrid style, action and turn-based combat system. It's very easy to pick up and understand, simply approach the enemy and attack in real time whilst rolling against its moves, and then once you've dealt enough damage to stun them, initiate the turn-based mode to start off with a huge advantage. I've already mentioned this a lot already in my previous videos when discussing the Daybreak entries, but this combat system is honestly perfect. It's all the previous game's mechanics crammed into Sky First Chapter, and is by far the biggest difference between the original title and the remake since we've now come full circle. Speaking of, the new attack animations for everyone's moves look stunning, and their S-Crats in particular, which is their ultimate abilities, look on par with some of the highest budget games out there. They truly are a sight to behold. This remake's vibrant and gorgeous visuals are some of the best I've seen all year. There's even more fully animated cutscenes this time around when compared to the previous Daybreak entries. They're worth replaying the game alone for. They play out like the original and have more life and animation put into them than ever before, giving you a whole new perspective on how these scenes play out. As an experience, I can see that this all holds up incredibly well today with its new coat of paint. Whilst its pacing might not be for everyone, if you enjoy its slow burn and in-depth amounts of world building, then Trails in the Sky First Chapter is one of the finest JRPGs around, and in my opinion is the best JRPG 2025 has to offer next to Clair Obscura. Okay, now that we've gone over why this game is so incredible, I want to talk specifically about the remake side of First Chapter. We all knew this game was amazing, it's still one of the best Trails games in the series, but how did Gung Ho, the new localizers, and Falcom themselves go about restoring this title into the modern day? Well, I'm straight up just gonna say this, First Chapter is the best remake I've ever experienced before. Like seriously, it looks so impressive graphically that there were moments where I had to remind myself that I'm playing a remake and not a brand new title. There's no nonsense here, no cut content, no censorship, it's the original game in its purest form, beat to beat, event to event. They absolutely respected the source material whilst bringing in some necessary quality of life improvements such as with its battle system and user interface. As much as I love the Final Fantasy VII Remake project, my biggest issue with it is how you don't get all the party members as they were unlocked in the original PlayStation release of the game. For instance, Red 13 wasn't playable in Part 1 during the Midgar section, and Sid and Vincent aren't playable in Rebirth. There's also other upcoming remakes such as Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, which is already stated to cut content from the original to trim out certain pacing issues that people have complained about. I personally really prefer how First Chapter went about remaking the original Skies game. Sure, the school play scene and tournament section might have been seen as filler to some, but to cut them out because a few people online complained about it would be robbing players of that authentic experience. As much as I love the games that Square Enix put out, they have set a rather polarizing standard when it comes to remaking JRPGs with just how different some of them can be from their original counterparts. Trails in the Sky First Chapter's remake is more in line with what I prefer, and in many ways it practically replaces the original version of the game as a definitive experience. It's also just crazy comparing this remake with the original entry that came out back in 2004. This is the first game in the Trails series to debut with a worldwide release, which is worth celebrating. If you know anything about this series' history when it comes to localization, then you'll understand just how much of an achievement this actually is. On the topic of localization, Gung Ho are the translators for this particular game, which means the series has now gone through multiple different localizers. This includes Xseed, who did the original Sky trilogy, as well as the first two Cold Steel games. There was also NIS, who pretty much translated every other title with some of the help from the fan translators at Geofront, and now there's Gung Ho who's taken over this remake project. I know this topic can be pretty controversial, but I found the translation in this remake was pretty spot on with Xseed's original script. It almost felt one-to-one at times, which I can appreciate. But I will say, some of NIS's localizations, such as the way certain names are pronounced, have been changed in Trolls in the Sky First Chapter's remake. For instance, the characters now pronounce liberal as just liberal, and I also remember how they've altered the way Jin's name was pronounced from Daybreak to just being pronounced as Zin. On top of that, I also noticed how Luve's name is now pronounced as just Loe. This is all just me nitpicking at the end of the day, especially for a series with so much of its own names and terminology. It's just something I thought was worth bringing up since it stood out to me whilst playing. And I can't really tell if these altered pronunciations were intended or not. Maybe Gung-Ho only looked at XC's script and not at the voice acted entries such as Cold Steel. Now, capping off my opinion on First Chapter's remake, I have to bring up one particular moment that made me raise an eyebrow regarding what Estelle says here.
Doesn't he have an impressive mustache? Impressive, huh? I think it looks sus.
My life is complete! It says sus. It says sus.
I mean, I guess Among Us is now canon in the Trails universe. This kinda makes sense when you really think about it, since there's so many criminal organizations to begin with, we may as well add crewmates into the mix. I need to preface here that I am indeed making a joke here, please don't take this seriously. With that tangent out of the way, I did really enjoy the remake's localization overall, small inconsistencies aside. I'd also like to comment on just how the mere inclusion of voice acting really elevated this game's experience for me. Now, I'm going to be completely honest about myself for a second. When reading a lot of text like in the original Skies trilogy, I could sometimes struggle to process some of its more nuanced and minor bits of storytelling. But when watching these same cutscenes which are voice acted in the remake, I found everything is so much easier to digest and understand. There could be some bias from me here, since I did technically play this story for a second time, but I can just see this aspect bridging the gap for more casual fans potentially getting into this series in the future. And that's ultimately what I really hope this remake does, for this series to grow an even bigger fanbase. Sales and reviews so far are looking very promising, so here's hoping. It's looking like plans are already in motion to remake the second chapter, which is my personal favourite installment in this series, so I'm very much looking forward to when that comes out. And I mean, Falcom, if you're gonna make the assets for the second chapter remake, then you may as well do Trolls in the Sky the third, and if we're really stretching things, then why not just do the crossbow duology since they use some assets from the Sky trilogy. Alright, I know I'm being greedy at this point, but who knows, their release output is so consistent, so I'm sure they're at least considering how far they want to stretch this new remake of all the titles approach. I know I haven't really been very negative in this video, but that's because nothing about First Chapter really bothers me. It's a masterpiece plain and simple. This remake only further proves the fact that all it really needed was a facelift in the modern day. But with all that being said, now I'm curious, what do you think about Trolls in the Sky First Chapter remake? Are there any titles you're hoping get remade eventually? Feel free to let me know in the comment section. Also, any feedback on this video will be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.